In the village of Oluma, everybody talked even when they were not asked. And when Amoka told them she was marrying a man named Chigazi, the whole place buzzed like a broken radio. "That poor carpenter boy," one woman said with a long hiss. "He doesn't even have anything to call his own," another laughed. Even Amoka's mother wiped her hands on her wrapper and shook her head. "You'll suffer, Amoka. Mark my words." But Amoka didn't listen. She had made up her mind. She loved Chigazi. He was calm, respectful, and kind. He didn't have much, but he had peace. And to Amoka, that was worth more than gold. They had their wedding behind his small wooden house. There was no DJ, no decoration, and no meat. Just a few plastic chairs, some jollof rice in takeaway coolers, and a small group of people who didn't laugh at their love. Her parents didn't come. None of her friends showed up. She wore a borrowed dress and tied her hair in a scarf. Chigazi gave her a simple metal ring. Her hands shook when she put it on. Not because of fear, but because of hope. That night, as they sat outside looking at the moon, Amoka said, "People think I'm stupid for marrying you." Chigazi looked at her with soft eyes. "Are you?" he asked quietly. She smiled. "No. Because I see what they don't see." But things got harder after the wedding. Amoka's father told her never to call him again because he wanted her to marry a rich suitor that came to ask for her hand in marriage, but Amoka refused because the rich suitor was rude and never respected her. Her mother refused to answer her messages. At the market, people stared. Some whispered and laughed behind her back. But she didn't care. She began helping Chigazi at his workshop. She swept the floor, fetched nails, and even carried wood on her head. Sometimes they didn't eat all day. But they laughed. They talked. They prayed. Still, something about Chigazi felt deeper than he showed. He was always writing in a small black notebook. Sometimes, he would walk alone to the hill and sit there for hours, just staring at the sky. He never told her what he thought about on those long walks. It started with skipped meals, few weeks after the wedding. Chigazi would say he wasn't hungry. He'd pretend to be fixing something outside just so Amoka would eat alone. But she knew. She could see it in the way his hands trembled when he picked up his tools. They had nothing left. The workshop was empty. No customers. No wood. Not even nails. Amoka tried selling vegetables on a tray, but people in the village avoided her. "That's the girl who ran off with a broke carpenter," they whispered. "Let her suffer small." One night, Amoka found Chigazi sitting in the dark, staring at his hands. "I'm sorry," he said. "You deserve more than this." "I didn't marry you for food," she replied, her voice firm. "But we can't keep living like this." They had just soaked Gary in water that night and called it dinner. Amoka hesitated before speaking again. "Let's go to my parents' house. Just for a while. They'll be angry, yes. But they'll feed us." Chigazi's face darkened. "Your father hates me. Your mother too. And that sister of yours, I know," she said. "But I can't watch you starve." The next morning, they packed a small bag and walked to her family home. Amoka's heart beat fast. She hadn't stepped foot there since the wedding. Her mother opened the gate and stared at them for a long time. No smile. No greeting. "So, hunger finally brought you back," her mother said. Inside, her father didn't speak. He just sipped his tea and turned the radio up. Chinello, her younger sister, came out with a mocking grin. "Oh, carpenter and queen. Welcome." They were not offered food that day. At night, Amoka begged her mother again. "Please, Mama. He hasn't eaten. At least give him something small." Her father pointed at the backyard. "Let him sweep and clean the toilets first." Amoka stared at him in shock. But Chigazi simply nodded and went outside. Amoka didn't sleep that night. Her husband, her pride, was now being treated like a houseboy. And he said nothing. He worked the next day too. Quietly. But something inside him was changing. And Amoka could feel it. Before we continue, please do not forget to follow us for more beautiful stories. It means a lot to us. Let's continue. The next day, they asked him to wash all the family's clothes, sheets, towels, and wrappers that had soaked in dirt. We don't use dirty clothes here, Chinello mocked. You better use your strong carpenter hands to wash those clothes well. Chigazi obeyed quietly. While he was scrubbing one of the wrappers with shaking hands, Chinello shouted from the kitchen window, "Go and buy me Maggi and pepper." He raised his head, wet and tired. "Let me just finish washing these ones first," she hissed. "What did you say?" He repeated it, more gently this time. "Please let me just rinse these few, I'll go immediately after." She disappeared. A moment later, she returned carrying a bucket of dirty water. Before Chigazi could react, she poured it all over him. Amoka ran out when she heard the shout. "Chinello! What did you do?" "He's lucky it was just water," Chinello said. "Poor man wants to be giving command in someone else's house." Amoka knelt beside her husband, helping him up. His shirt clung to his chest. His eyes looked tired, but they held something else now, something deep, dark, and steady. That night, Amoka cried. "Let's leave, Chigazi. We don't deserve this." But he only stared at the ceiling. "One more day," he whispered. "One more day, before we leave." The morning after the water was poured on him, Chigazi woke up before the sun. He didn't touch the breakfast they gave him, soaked leftover yam with no salt. He simply sat outside, eyes fixed on the street, waiting for something. Or maybe, someone. Amoka came out quietly and sat beside him. "Let's go," she whispered. "We don't need this place. I am sorry I asked us to come here. I thought they would help us. I didn't know they would be this wicked to us." He didn't answer right away. Then, with a soft but firm voice, he said, "One last thing." At noon, a black SUV pulled up in front of the gate. It was silent, powerful, and clean like it didn't belong in the dusty village. Everyone came outside, Amoka's father, her mother, Chinello, even neighbors. The car door opened, and a tall man in a suit stepped out. "Sir, we are ready," the man said, bowing slightly toward Chigazi. The compound went silent. "Ready for what?" Chinello asked, confused. Chigazi stood up slowly. For the first time since he entered that house, his shoulders straightened. His voice no longer shook. "I told you I had one more day." He walked to the gate. The man opened the back door of the SUV. Inside were two more men in black suits and a folder on the seat. "What's happening?" Amoka's father asked, stepping forward. "Who are these people?" Chigazi turned and looked at him calmly. "I'm the owner of Gold Crest Holdings," he said. "We build estates and hotels in 4 states. I've been silent because I needed to know if your daughter married me for my name or my heart." Everyone froze. Amoka's knees almost gave out. Chigazi looked at Chinello. "You poured water on a man who could have paid your school fees till graduation. You mocked me because you thought I had nothing." He looked at Amoka's parents. "You judged me without knowing who I was. But your daughter, she fed me when she had nothing. She wiped my face when you threw dirt. She saw me, even when I was hidden." He turned to Amoka. "Come with me," he said gently. Tears poured from her eyes, not because of the wealth, but because everything she believed about him was true. He was good. He was real. He was hers. She followed him to the car. And the gate closed behind them. The ride from her parents' house was silent. Amoka sat in the SUV beside Chigazi, her hands trembling on her lap. She looked at him, his posture, the calm way he typed on a sleek phone, and realized she was sitting beside a man she had never truly known. And yet somehow had always known. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, her voice cracking. Chigazi stopped typing. He looked at her gently. "Because the world is full of people who love money, not people. I've met enough of them to know the difference. I needed to find someone who would still hold my hand when I had nothing." Amoka wiped her eyes. "But you had everything." "No," he said softly, "I didn't have you yet." They arrived at a large compound. A quiet estate with flowers that bent gently in the wind and guards who bowed without asking questions. Amoka stepped out, barefoot, dusty, still wearing the old clothes from her father's house. A female staff came running. "Madam, let me take your bag." Amoka clutched it tighter. "No. I'm fine." She was still trying to understand what her life had just become. Inside, the living room was bigger than her parents' entire house. Gold-trimmed curtains. Soft leather chairs. Clean, cool air. She didn't sit. She just stood there, shaking. Chigazi turned to her. "This is your home now." "But I don't belong here," Amoka whispered. "I'm just Amoka." Chigazi smiled. "You're the woman who washed wounds with me in the workshop. The one who shared Gary water without complaint. You belong here more than anyone." That night, he gave her a ring again. This time, it was gold, with a small diamond. Not to replace the old one, but to sit beside it. "Both rings matter," he said. "One reminds me who you were. The other reminds me what you became." Amoka cried quietly. Not because of the house, or the cars, or the wealth. But because the man she married in a backyard with no music had just placed a crown on her head with his heart in his hands. It started with whispers. A Kiki driver said he saw Chigazi step out of a black SUV in the city. A boy from the nearby estate said, the carpenter, had 3 men open doors for him at a big hotel. By evening, Oluma village was buzzing like a disturbed hornet's nest. "Are you sure it's the same Chigazi? The one that used to fix tools in front of Momanechi's shop?" By the next morning, villagers began stopping by Amoka's parents' house, not to apologize, but to gather information. Some stood with bowls pretending to buy Gary from Momanechi's shed next door. Others just lingered, sweeping non-existent dust. Chinello was inside, pacing. Her stomach turned as she replayed the image of the water splashing over Chigazi's back. She remembered laughing. Now she couldn't even meet her own eyes in the mirror. Then it happened. A black SUV stopped quietly in front of their gate. A young man in a simple white shirt stepped out, holding a brown envelope. "Good morning, sir." "Message from Mr. Chigazi," he said, handing it to Amoka's father. He opened it slowly, his hands already trembling. Inside was a note: "You insulted me. You mocked me. But your daughter chose me through it all. I forgive you. But I hope you never forget." Chigazi. Below it was a check. 2 million naira. To repay every insult, and every meal your daughter begged for. The compound went quiet. Amoka's father sat down slowly on the plastic chair by the doorway. He read the note again, carefully this time. Then again. He placed it on his lap and covered his face with his hands. For a long time, he didn't speak. "I misjudged that boy," he said at last. "I treated a good man like trash." Amoka's mother sat beside him, eyes red with tears. She sniffed and wiped her face with her wrapper. "And I called him a mistake," she whispered. "My own daughter begged me for food, and I turned away." Inside, Chinello locked herself in her room. No sound came from there for hours. Outside, the gate stayed open, quiet, still, and filled with regret. 3 days after the check arrived, and the village calmed down, Chinello wrote a letter. She didn't type it. She didn't text. She sat down with a pen and paper, the same way her late grandmother once wrote letters to her father, and poured out words that burned in her throat. Dear Amoka and Chigazi, I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me either. I called you names. I poured dirty water on you. I treated you like a slave. All because I thought you were nobody. But you were somebody. Not because you had money. But because you never raised your voice. You never insulted us back. You never made Amoka feel small, even when we all tried to. I was jealous. Not of your poverty, but of your peace. Of how she looked at you. Of how she followed you even when it looked like you had nothing. I'm sorry. I really am. If I can ever carry your bag, or sweep your compound, or just sit with you and say thank you, I will. I don't deserve your kindness. But I hope one day, I'll be worthy of your forgiveness. Chinello, she gave it to a delivery boy and paid 500 naira from her savings. Give it to him directly. Not the gate man, she said firmly. Chigazi read the letter silently. Then handed it to Amoka. She sat on their balcony and read it twice. She means it, Amoka said softly. Chigazi leaned back in his chair. I know, he replied. But meaning it and changing are two different things. That night, Amoka picked up her phone and sent Chinello a voice note. Thank you for your words. I believe you're truly sorry. But give us time. We are still healing. No reply came immediately. But hours later, Chinello responded, I'll wait. Even if it takes years. Months passed like quiet rain. Chigazi and Amoka built a life that was full of peace and joy. No sirens, no noise, just steady days filled with love, quiet laughter, and the simple beauty of having each other. Their home became a place of healing, not just for themselves, but for others too. One morning, a car pulled up in front of their gate. Amoka opened the door and froze. It was her father. Beside him stood her mother, looking down at her feet. Chinello was with them too, holding a bowl of fruits and a bag of water leaf. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Amoka's mother stepped forward, eyes wet. We came to say sorry, she said. Chigazi walked out slowly, saying nothing. Her father cleared his throat. I was wrong, he said. We were wrong. You showed us what real strength looks like. You didn't raise your voice, and yet you spoke louder than all of us. Chinello stepped forward. We judged you by your clothes. But it was your heart that dressed you best. Amoka hugged her mother first. Then her father. Then Chinello. Nobody cried out loud, but their eyes told stories their mouths could never speak. 2 weeks later, Chigazi and Amoka returned to Oluma village. This time, there were no whispers behind their backs. There were claps. Hugs. Even quiet apologies from neighbors who once called Amoka the girl who married poverty. The chief invited them to sit at the front of the next village gathering. And when Chigazi gave a short speech, he said only this, I was once invisible here. But your daughter saw me. And that was enough. Later that night, back at their home, Amoka and Chigazi sat under the stars. The gate was quiet. The air was cool. A new peace had settled, not just in their home, but in their hearts. Would you still have loved me, he asked, if we never left the village? She leaned on his shoulder and whispered, I loved you long before we had anything to leave behind. They didn't need music. They had forgiveness. They had peace. They had each other. The end. Moral of the story, love is not proven by comfort but by endurance. Real love waits, suffers, and forgives. And sometimes, the people who once hurt you can one day kneel to bless you, if your heart stays kind. If you learned something from this story, please Please do not forget to like, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comment section. See you next time.